there's more to treating ADHD than just medication. That is the one thing that I wish I had known, and that I would say to parents, and it's worth going through the process of doing the testing and finding out what the results are and what you can do on a functional level before you start doing everything else.
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child podcast. Now, in my work, I've seen firsthand how much we can learn from each other's experiences. You know, every story of challenge and change brings this sort of new perspective that can really help guide and encourage others facing similar situations. And sharing these stories it's more than just sort of like giving you tips and tricks. It's about building a supportive community and showing others they're not alone. And this is really what my aim with this podcast is. It's that ability to create this space where families feel seen and heard, and where that practical advice comes from, real and lived experiences. This is about real change and real struggles, because the struggles are real, and real families really navigating and finding their way through the journey of ADHD with that hope and with that determination. And so today we have a special episode, and I don't do this very often, but I think today's episode really sort of shines this light on the journey of one remarkable family. Their story not only talks about the challenges that many face when navigating ADHD, but it also sort of shines that light on the power of embracing these natural strategies, embracing functional lab testing to transform their child's life. And through their experiences, we want to give you that encouragement. We want to give you that insight. We want to give you that practical advice for those that are walking a similar path to you. So my guest today is a mum who has witnessed firsthand the profound impact of dietary changes, targeted supplementation, and lifestyle adjustments for her child's ADHD symptoms. And we're gonna explore her story today. We're going to explore those moments where those decisions she made led to breakthroughs or not, and the learnings that she learned along the way. So I'm really excited today to welcome Marisa to the Soaring Child podcast. Hi, Marisa. How are you?
Hi, it's good. Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to share our story.
Yeah, so am I. I'm so excited that you're here. And as I said, I don't do these podcasts with families very often, but I had sort of this moment one day. I was like, I need to share those stories of hope, because I remember going through it with my son. I felt like I was on an island by myself.
Exactly. And I think that that's what you said is just so much a part of what you built. The community that you built it really makes you feel like you're not alone, and everybody's going through the same or similar things. And there's so much to be shared, and there's so much to learn, and you just feel like you have a community. That was definitely something I was looking for, and it was something that I found with all of the wonderful work that you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, awesome. Why don't you share with listeners, tell me a bit about your family. What challenges were you facing before you began implementing natural strategies to reduce ADHD symptoms?
So we are a family of three. Our daughter is 9. She's in 3rd grade. And we have also our sheepadoodle fur baby. So he rounds us out at 4.
I don't know if you saw my little doodle pop up at the window.
Yes.
Probably a little bit.
They are just as much. Yes, ours is probably double your size, but he really rounded us out. So we're so happy to have him, and he's been a great support for our daughter too. We hoped that, but we never would have imagined the relationship and the bond that they would have built too.
That's
She was diagnosed with ADHD probably about maybe 2.5 years ago.
yeah.
We tested her truly because we were noticing more of the hyper piece, how she was always busy. She's always looking for stimulation. She was always moving around. And then some emotional outbursts started to happen. They started out kind of like I wouldn't have even picked up on it until much later. So it was after the testing when the emotional dysregulation really started. So our challenges really were, she was a really picky eater. And she wasn't as a baby, which I always found very interesting. As they grow up, they I don't know where it comes from, but so she was a very picky eater. She had a very specific, like probably 5 things that she would eat regularly that I knew weren't good for her, but it was one of those things as a parent that you just want them to eat. So at times it's not the battle you're willing to have that hour of that day. And then we started noticing the emotional dysregulation and the outbursts and the breakdowns that she was having. I have to say that was really the biggest symptom that sent us into what do we need to do to help her, because it was just heartbreaking to watch and to witness and to go through and to not know what was going on and how we can help her. So, and then also her diet was giving us constipation. She was having digestive issues. She would go days and not go to the bathroom. And then I was also starting to notice signs of the yeast buildup. And it's candidinitis. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, or candida overgrowth, to make it more simple for listeners out there that haven't heard about it.
So I was noticing all those red bumps on the back of her arm. She was having a lot of itching, burning when she would go to the bathroom, especially when she was wet. So those were other things that we were starting to slowly pick up on.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I think emotional dysregulation is probably one of the hardest things. And if you actually look at the diagnosis categories of ADHD, it's actually not one of them. But I actually think that it's huge. I think it's like it should be, and I don't understand why it's not. That was the biggest thing for my son. I felt like we were constantly walking on eggshells or on this emotional roller coaster, not knowing what mood they were going to
trigger it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Your whole, I think, and it's also it's the thing that's going to affect your life the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did that look like for her?
She would just get to a place where she couldn't calm down, and her whole body would react. So she'd be kicking and screaming and hitting, not hitting us, or kicking us, but it would be always inanimate objects or herself, and it was just she could not calm herself down, and that was the hardest, most heartbreaking thing I think to watch as a parent, is that they would look at you and say, I help me, I don't know what to do, and you're at a loss too, because anything that you instinctually would try to do it never worked, and they would go on for sometimes hours. It would just last hours, and she couldn't calm down and she couldn't regulate herself. And then she would finally get to that place, and then it was like it never happened, but it was just the screaming and the crying and the carrying on. And to your point, you never knew what was going to set her off, or what kind of a mood she was going to be in, or, how she was going to wake up. So that was really that. It was like, I like to describe it as kind of a temper tantrum, but on adrenaline. That's what it was.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I think the biggest thing that I learned, obviously when I was going through this, I didn't know it. And I'm sure you didn't either, but like that is a warning sign from the body, from her saying, Mom, Dad, there's something wrong. I need to get checked out. So what, can you share with the listeners today what sort of prompted you to explore functional lab testing for her? What were your initial thoughts or concerns even about that process?
So that's really what started it for us,
Yeah.
was watching that struggle, that emotional struggle. And honestly, we were starting to get some judgment from some of our family, because when you don't understand ADHD,
Mm.
you don't get it. You look at any child and you think, why can't you discipline them? Why can't you calm them down? Why can't they regulate themselves? They're looked at as bad kids because they see it as bad behavior. And so we were getting a lot of that from some of our family members. And it really started to affect us as parents, because we started to think, what are we doing wrong? What's wrong? And more so not what's wrong with our child, but what is happening in her body that's causing her to do this? Because it wasn't, I hate to say the word normal, but it wasn't something that we could handle, we could fix for her. It wasn't like we could discipline her and calm her down and everything would be fine. It would just, she just was inconsolable, really. So we had some knowledge on emotional dysregulation and how her brain worked and how it was developing. And, we were working on implementing some processes that were more coaching. And it wasn't working. Like, we felt like we couldn't gain any traction. We were just almost like we were in quicksand, and we just couldn't, we were just treading water, and we would take like one step forward and then two steps back. So it was really sheer desperation that we started to just kind of throw the darts at the wall and see what stuck, really. So we tried occupational therapy, and it was great, but it wasn't right for her. It wasn't what she needed. And then honestly, a friend of mine said, you need to find your community. You need to do some more research. You just need to seek out, like, where are your people, basically, that you can talk to, because I had no one in my life that was going through something like this. And that's, they're like, let's find some podcasts if you don't have time to read. And so you were the first podcast that came out of the Soaring Child. It was, I swear it was like an answered prayer. That's the only thing I can liken it to, because I was walking and that was the first one that came up. And I like to start from the beginning of any podcast series. So I started at the beginning, and it felt like I was listening to myself talk. Everything that you shared about your son and all the ups and downs and your running dialogue in your head and your emotions. Like, this is me. And I remember getting off listening to that podcast and then ending and calling my husband in tears. It's like, this is it. We found it. This is exactly what we need. And it was because I had some background in functional nutrition for myself, and had been on a journey of health and healing for myself and my own gut, and had been on supplements for a long time. Like, I had some knowledge of that. And when I listened to your podcast, it just all clicked. And I went, oh, okay, well, yes. Knowing what I know, like, why didn't I think of this earlier? Why didn't I start applying? But then, you don't know to even think about that. Like, where do you even start with a child? Like, it's very easy as a grown-up to go in and speak for yourself and know how you feel and be able to express that. But she was 6 or 7 at that age. Like, she had no way to communicate that to me or to my husband. So,
and you don't connect it. You don't connect those meltdowns to gut. You don't connect those problems in school to that gut brain connection. And and so, unless you hear it wouldn't click. I had no idea. That's amazing. And I think that's extra special that you are now here on the podcast. So that actually gives me a little bit of warming in my heart. So on Tuesday,
yes, definitely. Like I said, I feel like it was you were an answer to a prayer, 100%. And because it just all made sense, it all fell into place, and it really, for the first time in our journey, I felt understood. I thought, oh my gosh, okay, this makes sense. And what you're saying makes sense. I mean, it just was like light bulb after light bulb after light bulb just went off with everything that you were saying and talking about. And it went, like you said, once you start hearing that and it clicks, you're like, yes, that's what's happening. And that's why things are the way that they are.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I know a lot of families out there, when they first hear about the gut brain connection or they start exploring this, they've never heard of like functional lab testing. From your, I've shared a lot of episodes on the Soaring Child podcast about functional lab testing. So for those that are new to the podcast, you can definitely go and check out those episodes. But I think from a family's point of view, could you maybe just walk us through that process, that lab testing process? What lab tests did you conduct? How did you prepare your child for them? Because again, it is until you sort of hear it, you're like, well, what does that sort of entail?
Yeah. So we went through the whole shebang. We did the cryptopyrrole, we did the gut test, we did the food sensitivity panel, and we broke down some very specific Zoomers for her, just in knowing what she likes to eat.
Yeah.
And, at first glance, getting into your website and reading, the top 5 things that you want to stay away from, like, well, that's all she eats, with the exception of soy. That's all she eats. So obviously I wanted to test her for those. And then we did the organic acid test. And honestly, I have to say, I know everybody feels about this with their kid, but our daughter's, she's awesome. And she is really, when she understands something, she has this innate ability to just say, okay, that's what we're doing now. And so we explained it to her as much as we could at her level. And it was really around like, here's all the information that we could give her that she would understand. And it's, your body doesn't feel good, and your body doesn't feel good. And so we have to get some tests done to understand what's going on inside your body. And these are the tests. And we showed her all the tests and talked about it. And she was actually really interested in all of them but one, which is the fingerprint one, which I feel like all kids probably. But it was actually a really easy process, simply because we just explained it to her and made her a part of the process, and really tried to, when she can understand, like, tie it back to something. Oh yes, I don't like how I feel, and they're going to help me make me feel better. She was really on board about it. It was just the finger pricking one, because she doesn't like anything that hurts. So that was the only one that was a challenge, I will say.
Fun one. And we definitely have many different tips and tricks and strategies around that finger prick one. I'm curious what tips and tricks and strategies you use to get that finger prick one.
So I will say, have a distraction. My parents came over. They were a huge help during this, and they were there and did what grandparents do, which was awesome. So having some type of distraction. And then we did use the cream, the numbing cream, and it did help. But looking back on it, I would have done it like we were very crunched for time. So I would have given it more time to settle, and I would have lathered it on her. Like, I was a little nervous about making her whole hand numb, but now, like, that's my advice. Just lather them up. Yeah. It's one hand, they'll be fine.
Awesome. Well, I think that there's many listeners out there that will definitely take that tip if they have to go down the finger prick path. Look, I think it's a really great way to talk to your child about it when they can understand the why at their level. It really does help the process. Every kid's different. Some kids won't be able to handle that why, but if your child can definitely understand that and process it and go, yep, we got to do what we got to do, then that's definitely a great way to approach it in talking about those lab tests and why you're doing them. Now, what were some of the key sort of findings from the lab tests, and were there any results that particularly surprised you or really provide you more of that moment of clarity?
Well, I found the cryptopyrrole testing fascinating. I knew nothing about that until we, went on this journey with you. And I thought that when that result came back and hers was off the charts elevated, and then I did the reading about what cryptopyrrole is, and what I was like, that's her to a T. That is why she's having these emotional dysregulations and the anxiety. And I mean, jumping ahead a little bit, but I can even see it now. If her pyrrole is too low, like, I know to bump it up, because if her anxiety starts to kick in, I can see where that happens. And it's fascinating to me that's how their body tells us that something's not right, versus them being able to express it like we can as adults. So that was one thing I found really fascinating. I also was fascinated, like I always am. I kind of nerd out about this food sensitivity stuff, because it's very interesting to me what our bodies can tolerate and can't tolerate. And a lot of her sensitivities surprised me. Some of them were things she's never eaten in her life. And some of the things, like I said, were things she ate every day. And so that was really interesting to me to find out what her her sensitivities were. And then as we've gone through the process, what we've been able to reintroduce and she's tolerated, and then what we reintroduced and she hasn't tolerated is also been very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know that you've recently been away, and so we haven't had a chance to catch up. What have you introduced that she wasn't able to tolerate?
Eggs.
Yeah.
She can't do it.
I will tell you that out of everything in all the kids that I've worked with, and I've worked with over 1,300 now, eggs and corn are the two that have that higher risk of kids reacting. Now, I think I've only had 2 kids that have never been able to add it back in, but most of the time you can, and there's definitely some things that we can talk about that will help you get that back in. Okay. So definitely jump on a group coaching call.
Yes, I will.
That one through. I'm sure listeners today don't want to hear me sort of go down that tangent, but I totally geek out on all of this stuff as well. Cryptopyrrole for me is fascinating. And I want to tell you a little bit, again, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but what I'm finding, so I do a lot of genetic testing in the business, did a couple of episodes of on genetic testing, I think podcast episodes back in December. And so for anyone that's interested in learning a little bit more about genetics, definitely go and check those out. But what I'm finding is the kids with the super high cryptopyrroles are the ones that have the compromised detoxification, methylation, and antioxidation pathways. And they're all words that are probably like, to some listeners out there, like, what did you just say? You probably, Marisa, have heard me talk about it before, being in the group, but I'm finding that the kids that have those really super elevated are more likely to have those compromised pathways. And it makes sense because with cryptopyrrole, it's a combination of oxidative stress and genetics. And so if the oxidative stress is really high, which means that there's toxins floating around in the body, they're causing a breakdown of the cells, then that pushes up cryptopyrrole levels. And it makes sense that if you've got compromised detoxification pathways, you can't get out those toxins. So they're more likely to be floating around and causing issues. Totally fascinating. The funny thing is, so when you get back your labs, and as I said, I've worked with lots and lots of families, and I've heard the reaction of when they get back their labs. You know, for some, it's sort of like really overwhelming. How did you first feel when you received those lab tests, and was there sort of that sense of relief, because you had the data, or as you would say, data, or did it sort of bring about new concerns for you?
Honestly, for us, it was a relief. It was almost a validation that we weren't crazy, that there was something that was going on that we couldn't identify outwardly, that it was all internal. And so it was a relief. I think the only thing that overwhelmed me and us really was, how are we going to get her to take all these supplements? That was the only thing. Other than that, we're like, oh, that's fine. The food thing, it's not, we'll figure it out. It's not a big deal. Kids are resilient. In 5 years, she's probably not even going to remember all of this. So that was the biggest thing, is because I think we go to doctors now, normal, not functional medicine doctors, and you're just always given something like, here's a pill, here's a pill, here's a pill. And we can never get to the root of the issue. And so we knew, and as parents, there's something that's not right with your kid, and to be just said, well, here's something that'll just help the behavior, but we're not going to get to the root of the issue. That's what it felt like, is we were seen, we had an answer to what was going on. And we just thought, okay, great. Now let's fix it. Let's fix the problem. And then we have the tools always at our disposal in case she starts to, it starts to get to a point where her body's struggling again. We know what needs to happen. We have a protocol. It's not completely like, okay, now we're going to add something else in for her to take on top to mask what else is going on. So it was a relief for us.
Oh, that's
truly
awesome. And I think I love what you said about, the food doesn't matter because in 5 years' time, she's not even going to remember. I think that's a perfect mindset to have. And interestingly, so I had a group coaching call today with parents in my program, and there was a lady whose child was wetting the bed, and she was really worried about that, and still young, still not super young, but still young. And I just said, look, when they're graduating college, they're not going to be wetting the bed. Some kids take longer to, not to make that chemical that they need in their brain to stop urinating overnight. Mm-hmm. And so it's like that little shift in that mindset. So I think that was beautiful that you said that, because it is so true. What's 3 months in the whole scheme of things when they're thriving through high school and then, graduating and things like that. So I love that you shared that. And so, you touched on supplementation. So when you got back the labs, how did your approach to sort of managing her ADHD symptoms change? So, what sort of dietary changes, lifestyle supplement changes did you make as a result? And obviously I know the answer to this question, but, really I want to share it from a family's point of view that's understandable.
Absolutely. So we made a big point to let her know we're all in it together, that it wasn't, we've always been very sensitive about talking to her about her ADHD, because we never want it to be a handicap for her and something that she leans on, that she, is like, well, I can't do that because I have this. So we've always been very sensitive to how we talk about it. So we're like, we're in it together. We're all going to do this. So if you can't have eggs, we're not going to have eggs. If you can't have cheese, we're not going to have cheese. And we're going to figure out how we can still eat the same things that we love and enjoy the food that we love together. And it's so you don't feel like you're the only one that has to do this. We still do it to this day, even though her supplementation we're at the tail end of everything. We all take our vitamins together. So she can see that, because for a while in the beginning, she would say, oh, why do I have to be, I'm taking all these supplements? And my husband and I are like, we take more than you do. Look at all the ones that we have to take, and we're swallowing the pills. And so that was a big thing, is just making it like we're doing this as a family. And that has helped a lot for her to feel like it's just the way we're doing things now. This is how we live and this is how we eat. We also tried to not make a big deal about it. We just explained it to her, and then we're like, okay, this is our life now. This is what we're doing. So I think the biggest challenge was just, we used to eat out a lot. That was a big thing for us. And she loves to eat out. So we didn't do that for a while until we felt like we had a better understanding of where we were going and what was being served and what she could tolerate and what she couldn't tolerate. But yeah, that was how we approached it. It was, I probably make it sound like it's easy, but it was, we definitely had the challenges. It was hard at first with the dietary. She loved her bread and cheese and pizza. She couldn't have pizza. She couldn't have tomatoes. She couldn't have cheese. She couldn't have bread. So that was hard at first to figure out how are we going to navigate through that. And there was a couple weeks of being upset that she couldn't have pizza with her movie night. But I think it was just digging in as her parents and figuring out what can we give her in place of that? Like, what can we substitute that'll be okay, that'll make up for the fact that that's gone. And honestly, what I have found, she can have the tomatoes now, she's fine, but the pizza that I started making, like, that's what we have now. We don't even miss the stuff that we were having before. So I think that's another thing, is you just got to get over that hump. Like once you get over the hump, then it's just like a nice sled ride down into the rest of your life.
Marisa, you're sharing some amazing mindset shifts, I think, for listeners out there, because I think, what I heard was saying that we're just doing this. And if you approach it like that as a family and say, yep, this is what we're doing now, then it actually is a lot easier than trying to fight off anything, because that fight from you will affect the way that, your children will embrace whatever changes you're making. And it does. It's just getting over that hump. I was talking in a group coaching call today. Someone was saying that they were going away and they said, oh, so like when you go away, do you take frozen food with you? And I'm like, I don't even think about it. I do not even think about it anymore. We went to Africa on safari, and the only thing I took with me was snacks, because, the snacks that you buy when you're away are not the greatest. So I just took snacks with me. But I know how to eat like this. I know what to order at restaurants. We go out every week.
Yes.
And I don't even think about it anymore. So it is just getting over that little hump. It's just creating that new normal for you. And when you create the new normal for you, it's just easy, isn't it?
That's your new normal. It's kind of like, what is it? They say 28 days to build a new habit.
Yes.
So that's what I likened it to is, and you're right, we don't even think about it. And I think something else that you share in the beginning of your journey is that you don't eat the whole elephant right when you start. And that can be like, I'm like, okay, we got to do this and we have to do this. And I remember you saying that several times in the modules, but then also on a couple of the calls I was on, like, you guys, one thing at a time. And that is something too to remember. I think we go in and we think we just need to do it all at once. And that's in itself overwhelming for us, because you think, well, what am I going to, I have to go out and buy a whole new pantry and all this new food. And it's just, that's another thing that we did was week one, it was, we just did one thing at a time, and then before long, it was all gone. So,
So the what I usually say is Rome wasn't built in a day. So you don't need to make all of these changes either. But I just want to go back to what you said. You said you don't eat an elephant all in one go.
I thought that's what you said. I must have gotten that somewhere.
I've never heard that before, but I think that's who eats an elephant.
You know what? That might have been my husband, actually, him saying, we're not going to eat the whole elephant at once. So let's just take a bite.
I'm totally going to take that one now. That is going to be my new saying.
It's yours.
So Marisa, tell me, when did you start sort of noticing changes in your daughter's mood, behavior, and overall sort of well-being?
It was about probably 3 months. Within 3 months, her symptoms started to reduce. And then I would say once she was fully titrated up on the Pyrrole, they were like non-existent. So, because at that point we were pretty much almost through the supplementation regimen. She had been off, gluten, dairy, dyes, sugar for a while. But I mean, it was noticeable in her appearance as soon as she went off the gluten. Like that was, it's unbelievable what happens when you go off the gluten. But and then around the 3-month mark is when she also stopped complaining about missing the things that she was missing. So and it just takes time. And I think it's hard at first, but if there's anything I can say to parents out there, like, just give it the time, because you will get to that point where it's not something you talk about anymore. It's not something they complain about. You really do.
Yeah, definitely. So looking back, how do you sort of view the role of functional lab testing in her ADHD management journey?
I mean, it's a vital part. It's really frustrating that it's not a part of the diagnosis process in general, but that's not something that you go through with all the testing that you do go through. That's not even talked about or mentioned. I mean, it is a huge piece of it. And I like to think of it as building a foundation to the house, because I think that's what we felt like as her parents. We were trying to build this house, but we were on like sand, so it just kept falling. And the functional lab testing and the functional medicine, like, you used to have that foundation, and then you can build on it, and that's what keeps it solid. It's without that, you're just, like I said, shooting darts in the dark, and you hoping that you make.
It's like pin the tail on the donkey. You've got that blindfold on. You're twirling in all directions. People are yelling at you. You're trying to go here, there, and everywhere. And I love that analogy. It's sort of like that window into what's going on that's really exacerbating their symptoms. So what advice would you give to other families considering functional lab testing for their children with ADHD? Is there anything that you wish that you'd known before starting this process?
There's more to treating ADHD than just medication. That is the one thing that I wish I had known, and that I would say to parents, and it's worth going through the process of doing the testing and finding out what the results are and what you can do on a functional level before you start doing everything else. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's just food it's food and vitamins. And that's something we all do and look at and follow. So if it doesn't work, then all you've gained is just better eating habits and you're taking good vitamins. So I don't see it as like, what do you have to lose? Really?
Exactly.
It's not like you're, being put on this medication you know nothing about, or having to go to this therapy session for months and months and months. Like, this is truly changing you from the inside out.
And it is. And it's giving you that solid foundation of health. So, Marisa, are you like you have been an amazing guest to have on this podcast. I feel like you're a professional. Do you like go around to podcasts and take interviews?
No, but it's funny you should say that. In my life before becoming a mom, I was a training manager. So I would go around and train people. So I'm used to talking.
That's awesome.
And explaining things.
I think that, this sort of episode today, it's clear that the journey to managing ADHD symptoms is both personal and I find profound. I don't think the journey is just for the child. I think it is for the whole family. And I think that everything that you've shared today really highlights that importance of that holistic approach. One that does look at those dietary changes, does look at those lifestyle modifications, does look at that functional lab testing and supplements. And I think that your story is a testament to the strength that families, when you're equipped with the right knowledge and the right support and determination, which you have shown today and throughout your journey, can make these amazing strides to improving their child's quality of life. I just want to thank you so much, Marisa, for sharing your journey with us, being so open and vulnerable. And, I'll have to have you back. As I said, you are an amazing guest. But
thank you
for sharing your journey with our listeners today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think that it's really great when we get to hear from each other. As like you said in the beginning, just know that there's other people out there that are going through the same thing and know what it's like and what it feels like, and can have that empathy is really. So I hope that that's what anybody can take away. Definitely what I took away when I heard you for the first time. I hope that I can do that for someone today as well. So
that's beautiful.
And I would love to be back anytime.
Oh, good. We'll have to get you on for another topic, a deep dive on another topic. To our listeners, I want to say thank you for joining us today. Remember, every child's path is definitely unique. But the one thing that all families have in common is they don't need to navigate it alone. I hope that today's discussion not only offers you hope, it empowers you with information, it encourages you to support all avenues that can support your child's health, well-being, and the ability to help them thrive. And I think together as a community, we can help them soar. So listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.